I did a lot of research. I researched Montmartre. I researched courtesans' apartments. I really wanted to know what the real Satine might have lived like, what her apartment would have been like. I looked at a lot of photographs of late 19th century Paris. There's some really beautiful photographs by this French photographer named Eugene Atget, who did these incredible long exposures on the streets of Paris, and they really give a vivid sense of that life.
Did you consult with Baz Luhrman?
I did, and but
What was that
also,
like?
Well, incredible. He was incredibly generous, and actually, the person I consulted with more was his wife, Catherine Martin, who is an extraordinary costume designer and production designer. And
She did the costumes for the movie and for
the sets. She did all the sets for the movie. So. And she was extraordinarily generous, and offered me all of her research from the movie. And I went to her studio, Catherine Zuber, the costume designer, and I went to her studio. And she said, not that you guys need it because you guys have your own ideas about this, but if you want any of it, it's here. And really, what I wanted to capture, and what Alex Timbers wanted to capture, more than anything, was the kind of sense of energy and anarchy of the movie. The movie has this incredible energy, the sense of the camera never stops moving, that it's racing over rooftops and in through windows, and of course a lot of it comes from the music. And so the audience is static, is sitting in seats in the Broadway theater. So how do we capture that?
And how did you?
Well, if we succeeded, we captured it partly by making the theater as immersive as possible. As you can see, there's no part of the theater that was untouched. We covered everything.
That wasn't an obvious choice, right? To do the whole theater in the way that you did. How did you arrive at that, and why?
Well, it was a couple of things. One was that, it was one of the first things Alex said to me when I was brought into the project. He said, I think we should consider making the theater the club. We should make it feel like when you walk into the theater, you've entered the Moulin Rouge. So that was sort of step number one. The other thing was that we chose for our out-of-town tryout, we chose the Colonial Theater in Boston, partly because when Alex and I went to look at it, it was painted red. So a couple months later, it turns out they renovated the theater, and in the renovation, they painted the walls green. And so, you can't do Moulin Rouge in a green theater. It's not possible. And so we had, and they couldn't, for landmark reasons, they couldn't repaint it again. So we had to do something. And so I ended up covering all the walls of the theater with velvet. But then when I went to look at getting the velvet, there was no single source of velvet that had enough velvets to cover the theater. In fact, it turned out I could only get enough yardage of using a combination of 5 different fabrics. And so then I said, okay, I'll just make a virtue of that, and I'll use 9 different fabrics. And so we covered the walls of the Colonial Theater with 9 different types of red velvet. And it worked like gangbusters. It was a really happy accident. It was so much better than if it had been just painted red.
It's hard to believe, but the Hirschfeld Theater is actually beige, right?
It was beige. It is underneath all of this. It's beige. Yeah.
So when you see people walk in and you see their reaction, I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you hear people and do
it's
you
a trip.
hear what they say?
Well, I wasn't really aware of it at first, and then. After the second or third preview, I was standing by the back by one of those doors, and the house manager came to me and said, hey, if you want to feel good, come stand by the door and listen to people's comments when they come in. He was right. It was amazing. It was really cool to hear people's reaction. That made me so happy.